Greetings, fellow duelists, and welcome to Budget Builds, the show where I look at some of the cheapest, most free-to-play decks currently available in Master Duel. I'm Hardleg Joe, if you didn't know, and what you just saw there a second ago was Crusadia OTK, a blind second deck that can easily one-punch your opponent for well over 10,000 damage, and which can be made mostly with just normals and rares. In fact, this particular build requires 0 ultra rares and just 2 super rares. Not 2 playsets, 2. Now you may notice that my list actually does contain 2 ultra rares in the main deck, but those are Harpy's Feather Duster and Lightning Storm, neither of which are required to play this deck, although I think both are a good investment, especially the Lightning Storm, which you could pick up for cheap in the Master Pack bundle. Now, if you haven't gotten these yet and you're completely out of gems, don't worry, because you can easily replace these with something like Mystical Space Typhoon or Nobleman of Crossout. They aren't as good, obviously, but they're easy to craft rares that will still work as spell trap removal in a pinch. Anyway, with that little disclaimer out of the way, let's go ahead over the list real quick, and then I'll explain how this works if you're unfamiliar. So we're playing 3 copies of each Crusadia main deck monster. That's 3 Reclusia, 3 Arborea, 3 Leonis, 3 Draco, and 3 Maximus. We got a couple of World Legacy cards, 3 World Crown and 3 World Lance, 6 Kaijus total, 3 Jizukiru and 3 Gadarla, a playset of Parallel Exceed, a playset of Forbidden Chalice, 1 Crusadia Revival, 1 Crusadia Testament, and 3 Crusadia Power. Now our extra deck contains 15 cards, but honestly, I only summon about 7 of them with any regularity, and you only really need 3 of them. The 3 Crusadia Link monsters, which are Magius, Regulex, and Equimax, with these 2 being the only super rares that you have to run. Now I would recommend Odd Eye's Meteor Burst Dragon, Crazy Box of all things, Malevolent Sin, and Pentastag, because these are all low rarity cards that can help you OTK more consistently. But again, you don't really need them to make the deck work, so if you don't have the crafting materials, don't worry about it. Everything else in here I'm not even going to go over because it's just stuff I had that was normal or rare, and you can replace it with whatever your heart desires. Although if you do have some extra super rare points, I'd highly suggest running another copy of these 2 and another copy of Regulex, obviously, so that you can have a backup just in case your OTK fails. So now that you know what we're playing, let's talk about how those cards actually work. Our main OTK combo requires you to open with any 2 Crusadia monsters that have different names, which is why we're playing as many names as possible at as many copies as possible. And speaking of that combo, let's go ahead and jump over to Edo Pro real quick so I can show you how that works in theory. Alright, so while this is a 2-card combo, I'm going to be starting with a 3rd card, a Kaiju, just to show you how that interacts with the deck. You don't need it though. As I said before, this is a go second build, so unless your opponent is on Eldritch or something, you can be pretty certain that they'll leave at least 1 monster on the field. It doesn't matter what it is though, because the first thing you're going to do is tribute it to special summon a Kaiju, which you'll want to place in front of either extra monster zone. Doesn't matter which, as long as it's free. Next, you want to normal summon a Crusadia monster. Doesn't matter which one necessarily, but in this case, we're going to be using Maximus for reasons that'll become clear later. Once you have him on your field, you can special summon your Link 1 Crusadia Magius. Now all the main deck Crusadia monsters share an effect that, once per turn, you can special summon them from the hand to a zone that a Link monster points to. And since Magius points down, we can summon Leonis right here. Now our link says, when a monster is summoned to a zone it points to, you can search a Crusadia monster, so let's do that. Now all the Crusadias have unique effects, and if you're going to play this deck, you really should take the time to sit down and read them, because they form a nice neat toolbox for specific situations. And plus, I'm not going to read them for you, because I'm not your dad. Regardless, in this situation, the most important one to take is Draco, so we're taking that. Alright, so now that we have our 2 monsters on the field, we can go ahead and make our Link 2 Crusadia Regulex. Now at this point, you may be noticing that this thing has a shit ton of attack. And that's because all the Crusadia Link monsters share the following bit of text. Gains attack equal to the combined original attack of all monsters this card points to. Monsters this card points to cannot attack. So since Regilex points up towards this kaiju, it gains all of its attack on top of the 1,000 it started with, which is why it's so important to place the kaiju in this specific spot. Anyway, Regilex also points down, which means we have space to special summon our Draco. Like Magius before him, Regilex searches something when a monster is summoned to his zone, in this case, getting a Crusadia spell trap. In addition, when Draco is summoned, it grabs a Crusadia monster from the graveyard. If you recall, we started this by normal summoning Maximus, which means we haven't used his special summon effect yet, so let's go ahead and grab him. As well as whatever spell trap from our deck, doesn't really matter, let's just take this one. Once that's done, it's time to make our big boss monster, the Link 3 Crusadia Equimax. Like the others, this will gain the attack of the monsters it points to, but also it has an effect to negate. It can negate any face-up card on the field by tributing a monster it points to, which means you're going to have a way to deal with battle traps if need be, as well as some disruption options if you happen to go first. We aren't going first though, we just want to OTK, so for now, we're going to special summon Maximum to a zone that this points to, and make our boss monster's attack very nice. Now Maximus doesn't do anything when he's summoned, instead he has an effect you can activate, where he can target a Crusadia Link monster, and this turn, it deals double battle damage when attacking a monster. Which means, it's over for your opponent. 6,900 into 3,300, 3,600 damage, which when doubled equals not quite an OTK. But it would have been if I had searched the field spell instead of this thing, because the field spell gives your Link monsters an extra 500 attack boost, which when doubled would have been 1,000, enough for lethal. It's also worth pointing out that this would have been an OTK if your opponent had any other attack position monster with less than 3,000 attack. Or if we had any other monster that we could summon to the other zone of Equimax, since even our weakest one would have boosted him enough to go into OTK range. Despite what I just did there, it is really easy to OTK with this deck. I'm just saving that for the replays, which I'll get to after we do a little in-depth card by card. So going back to our list, you should know by now why we're playing so many Crusadias. Any two of them allows you to get into Equimax with a monster underneath him. After the Crusadias, we're playing two extenders in the form of World Legacy - World Crown and Parallel Exceed. These serve essentially the same role that your Crusadias do, except that they can't start your combo because your Link 1 needs a Crusadia. If you've got at least one of those already though, then opening either of these extenders will allow you to complete your combo anyway, while giving you some bonuses in the process. Crown can tribute itself to negate extra deck monsters, which can sometimes be important for breaking certain boards, or at least for insulating your plays, while Exceed can summon additional monster from the deck, which can be used as link material or to make a rank 4 Ixie. Any of the rank 4s we're playing down here will boost Equimax higher than Parallel does on its own, but Crazy Box in particular gives the biggest attack boost with 3,000, which is why we play it. As for Malevolent Sin, while its attack isn't as high, its Banish effect can be used to bait out some disruption, or simply to remove troublesome monsters like Titanic Galaxy, which might be able to redirect your attacks. Anyway, next up we're playing the Kaiju package, again, 3 Gadarla, 3 Jizakiru. These are not only good as monster removal, but if you get 2 of them, then the other one can act as an extender. You just special summon it to a zone that a Link monster points to. Now we're playing these 2 specifically because they're cheap, and because Gadarla can potentially play around Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds. Honestly though, you can play any Kaijus in this deck, so if you already have some unlocked, don't spend the points on it, just play those. With Crusadia, it does not matter how much attack they have, because you will just gain it back with Equimax as long as you place it in the right zone. And even if you don't, that doesn't necessarily matter if you open with our one hand trap, World Legacy World Lance. This thing works kind of like a reverse Honest. If your Link monster battles, you can discard this during the damage step, and your opponent's monster loses 3,000 attack, making an OTK all but assured. It can be a little overkill sometimes, and a little bricky from time to time, but you'll be glad to see it if your boss monster ever ends up getting negated. That being said, if you were to replace anything in this deck with meta staples, World Lance is probably the first thing you'd get rid of. Following that, we've got the spell trap removal I mentioned earlier. These are just to make sure we can clear the back row, make it easier to OTK. After that, we've got our Crusadia spells, 1 Revival, 1 Testament, and 3 Power. Power is the most useful, which is why we play it at 3. It's a quick play spell that allows you to target a Crusadia you control and make it unaffected by other card effects until the end of the turn. This is great for helping you play through Disruption, since you can protect any of your monsters, either your final boss or the pieces on your way to make it, insulating your plays, making your opponent waste some of their stuff, and making sure that your searches go through. The only downside to this is that it's a hard once per turn, so if you've used one, there's no point in searching another one. And since you do search halfway through your combo with Regilex, we've got a couple other spell trap options for you to get, just in case the situation warrants it. The field spell, despite its name, doesn't actually revive anything. Instead, it gives all your monsters a small attack boost and lets your Link attack every monster your opponent controls, which can sometimes be essential for the OTK depending on the board. Testament, meanwhile, is something you usually search when you know you can't OTK. It says if your Crusadia Link monster destroys a monster by battle, you can draw cards equal to its Link rating. We usually end on a Link 3, which means you can potentially draw 3 cards and get into one of our tech cards, like Forbidden Chalice. This is a nice, cheap, quick play that you can activate going second to bait out any monster-themed negation your opponent might have. Obviously, if you have Imperm or more Lightning Storms or other meta staples, they are probably better than this, but if you're looking to build on a budget, this is one of the better cards, especially going second. All that leaves then is the extra deck, which as I said earlier is entirely optional. These are things that you only summon in very specific situations with very specific hands. Crusadia Arborea, for example, just happens to be a level 3 tuner, so if you get her and any other level 4 underneath Equimax, you can use them to make Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon, who, in addition to bestowing more attack than any 2 Crusadias would on their own, will make it so that your opponent's monsters can't activate their effects when you attack. Not useful 99% of the time, but you'll be happy to have it the 1% of the time that it does come up. Same with the rest of these. Sometimes you want to do piercing, so you summon Pentastag. Sometimes you need a monster to go face down, so you get the Super Quants. Other of these, like the Codebreaker Virus Swordsman, Crazy Box, Gaia Knight, these are just high attack monsters that we happen to be able to make with just about anything. The only other thing worth mentioning here is Track Black, which can sometimes help you survive for another turn when you can't OTK. This is a Link 2 that lets you target Equimax, and every time he destroys a monster by battle, you get to draw a card. So if your opponent just happens to have a wall of defense position dudes, and you've got the field spell allowing you to attack all of them, as well as this, you could potentially draw like 5 cards. That situation hasn't happened in all the time I've been testing this, but when it does, oh boy, will it be really funny. Anyway, as with the main deck, if you do have some ultra rare points you want to spend, you can make this deck a lot better by changing some of these out. For instance, the Crusadias do have a Link 4 in Mech Knight Crusadia Avramax. Did you know this was a Crusadia card? I think most people forget, but with Testament you can draw 4. That's always fun. He doesn't help you OTK, but he does benefit from all your spell traps, which can really help your survivability, especially if you go first or if you fail to one-turn kill. Like, having that with Crusadia power, just make him invincible, very nice. But anyway, that's enough explaining. Now it's time for action. I know what you really want to see. So let's jump in here and show what this thing can do. Alright, so our first duel is up against Virtual World, and while they haven't made the strongest board, this really helps highlight one of the strengths of Crusadia, which is that no one understands how it works. They don't know what to expect, and they don't know what to negate. We're going to start by kaijuing their Crystal Wing, as you saw, and then immediately summon a yugioh to threaten it, which baits out their trap, allowing us to do the Crusadia climb TM without worrying about much interruption. We're going to chain block using the Crusadia Draco, make sure we get our Maximus back, that way we can do the double battle damage. And then once we do that, we're going to go up into Regulex. And you're going to see here that when we Regulex, they're actually going to Ash Blossom the Spell Trap Surge, which is not a good play. We do not need our spell traps to OTK most of the time. The only one we have worth summoning is Crusadia Power, and that's just there to protect us against other stuff. So unless they had more disruption, no real point. From there, we're going into the Equimax. We're going to go ahead and summon the Maximus for double battle damage. Summon a Gadarla of our own, bringing it up to 9,000, which slams in for 12,600 damage, winning the game in not only a single turn, but a single attack. So next up, let's try something a little bit more threatening with Drytron, one of the scourges of high platinum. Like most players, this one manages to make a Herald of Ultimateness with no less than 3 negates, which would be frightening if not for the fact that we can just kaiju it away. Now, of course, you can be certain that they will have Herald of Orange Light in hand to negate, but by summoning the Draco on Magius, they can chain block and make sure that we get our Maximus search no matter what. And of course, there's the Orange Light coming down on Draco, but doesn't really matter. We have enough searches in hand that we can still get everything we want, and we've made sure that we got our Maximus, which again, you always want to end on if possible. That double battle damage, really just killer against most things. Now, I do play a little greedy here, searching with Regulex. If they had another Herald of Orange Light, that would have ended our turn. But fortunately, that isn't the case, so we can just go on and construct our board. With all of our monsters, plus double damage being added on by the Maximus, we can attack into the Union Carrier for 15,000 life points, almost double the amount needed for lethal. Okay, so one more replay, this time against a Bird Up player, although you wouldn't know it because they've decided not to do anything with their first turn. I mean, who really needs to be defensive when your opening hand contains Max C? Well, let me tell you something. With Crusadia, you always take the Max C challenge. You rush in there full force. Yes, if they get Nibiru, you will lose, but little else can stop you once you really get going, especially when you've got a decent hand like this. Which is one of the great positives of this deck, right? You are a literal glass cannon, so no matter what happens, it'll be fast. You're either winning in one attack, or you're fucking dead. And speaking of which, we probably would have been dead. We probably would not have been able to OTK, even with this hand, if not for the fact that they activated Gamma on the Parallel Exceed. Again, people don't know exactly how to play against this, but summoning a monster to their side of the field is one of the worst things they could have done. Not only does that allow us to put a Gadarla on their side of the field, now Maximus is attacking for double, hitting in 8,800 regardless of how massive your hand is. No amount of comeback ability will help you when there's nothing to come back from but the grave. Now, I should warn you that while those duels were on the ranked ladder, they were a little cherry-picked. This deck did win streak its way through gold and into platinum, but once it got there, it really started to struggle. A lot of the best decks in the meta really shove a potato in our tailpipe, if you know what I mean. Drytron in particular can usually negate your life away with Heralds of Orange Light, even if you kaiju their ultimateness. And back row heavy decks like Eldritch are nigh unbeatable unless you happen to draw your 2 spell trap removal cards. Now you might be able to counter that with some more hand traps, some more staples, maybe some good super rare and ultra rare cards, some of that more expensive shit. But I haven't had time to experiment with that yet, so I'm not exactly sure. But maybe someday in the future, let me know down in the comments if you'd like me to take a more serious whack at running Crusadia up the ladder to see how far it can go. For now though, I think I'm gonna call it here. Thanks for watching, be sure to subscribe if you like this video. Check out my Patreon, link in the description if you really like this video, want to support what I do, get on my Discord. And if you have any suggestions for future budget builds, leave them down in the comments. For now though, I'm out. Thank you all for coming, have a wonderful day, and until next time, good luck and have fun.